To discuss this issue, I spoke with the Trade Minister Dan Tehan earlier this evening.
Anthony Albanese has said that he would like some of our trade disputes resolved with China. And the question he needs to answer is which ones and which ones isn't he going to try and resolve? So is it our Western Australian barley growers that are left out in the cold? Is our South Australian wine growers, our Victorian lamb producers, Tasmanian fishing industry, the resources sector in New South Wales and Queensland, or the beef industry or our beef producers in the Northern Territory? When it comes to dealing with these trade disputes and to dealing with economic coercion, the Morrison government has taken a very firm position. We want these trade disputes, all of them, resolved, and that's what we've sought to do, and that's what we'll continue to do. Anthony Albanese seems to be wanting to have a bit each way, and you cannot have weakness when it comes to dealing with these types of issues. You have to have a very principled stand and you have to have strength. And it just seems it's that weakness that's showing through when it comes to Anthony Albanese's leadership. He's never had a national security portfolio and he always seems to just want to have a bet each way that I think isn't in Australia's national interest.
If Labor does take a different approach or perhaps even a softer approach to China, how would this impact on policy decisions and our sovereignty if Labor does win the upcoming election?
Well, ultimately it would have a big impact on our sovereignty, because if you're not prepared to stand up for your sovereignty, if you're not prepared to stand up and defend your values, then ultimately in the end you will have to sacrifice part of those. And that's why we've taken a very firm position. That's why the Morrison government's taken a very firm position that we aren't prepared to sacrifice our values, that we will stand up for our sovereignty, because as soon as you're prepared to give a bit and to have your sovereignty eroded, then it is a very slippery slope. And that's why the principal stand we've taken has been applauded globally. And it's why we're seeing, for instance, support come from the United States, the European Union, Japan and elsewhere for the stance that we've taken. And we're seeing other countries being prepared to stand up when they have trade disputes with China. And for example, at the moment, we're seeing that with Lithuania and the European Union.
And I'll come to that in just a moment. The new Chinese ambassador has extended an olive branch to Australia. He said he wants to improve China-Australia relations and get them, in his own words, back on the right track. What's your response to this? And has he requested a meeting with you or offered to organise a meeting after all of these months or even years now with any of your counterparts in China?
No, I'm still waiting for a response to the letter that I sent over 12 months ago now to my Chinese counterpart, requesting a ministerial meeting so that we could sit down and work through all the disputes that we have currently in our trading relationship. And so I would welcome the new Chinese ambassador being able to facilitate that meeting so that we could sit down and work through all these trade disputes with China. And if that can occur, the Morrison government has been very clear that we want that ministerial dialogue. But unfortunately, up until this date, we haven't been able to get that. And I'm still waiting for a response to the letter that I sent over 12 months ago.
Extraordinary, isn't it? Are you expecting this issue of Australia-China relations to become an election issue, something that there is a point of difference between Labor and the coalition?
Well, national security has always been something that coalition governments have prided themselves on. We take it incredibly seriously, as we should. When what we would like to see is, when it comes to the opposition and the approach that we're taking, that they be very clear that they either support it or they don't. What we're getting from Anthony Albanese at the moment is he says he supports the government's approach, but then in the next breath, he's always criticising the government's approach or saying that he would do better if he was to lead this country. Well, he should set out how and why he would do that. What are the differences? What's the different approach that he would take? I mean, we've seen him reflect that he wouldn't try to resolve all the trade disputes. He would just do some of them. And I think he needs to answer that question. But what are the other things that he would do? What's the other approach he would take? He either is with us or he's not. But what we seem to get is this bet each way. And I think the Australian people want more than that when it comes to our national security.
Just a moment ago, you referred to the fact that Australia will join the United States in backing the EU's WTO case against China. This is over its discriminatory trade practices against Lithuanian goods or even products that have some Lithuanian ingredients or elements in them. You know, while this is similar economic coercion to what Australia has faced, there is the question over why we should get involved in a dispute between China and Lithuania when this could once again trigger a fresh backlash against Australian businesses. What's your response to this?
Well, the global trading rules are absolutely essential to our trading relationship with the rest of the world. We have been involved in establishing those global trading rules. The fact that we export over 2/3 of what we produce is incredibly important to our economy. And therefore, any attempt to erode those global trading rules, ultimately in the end, it is an attempt to erode our economy. And so it's incredibly important that we take a principled stand when it comes to the World Trade Organisation and the use of the trading environment to try and get a change of policy or a change approach for any government. And we've always taken a very principled stand at the World Trade Organisation, and we will continue to do that, because if we don't, ultimately over time, it will harm our economy.
Look, finally, on the topic of Russia and Ukraine, Minister, the world is watching the Russian troops on the Ukrainian border and very concerned about how this could potentially escalate into a conflict. The UK Prime Minister Boris Johnson is preparing to speak to Vladimir Putin over the phone. How concerned are you about where this conflict could head, and does Australia plan to offer any support to the United States or to Ukraine?
Well, obviously, we welcome the fact that Prime Minister Johnson will be talking to President Putin. What we want to see is a de-escalation of the build-up of troops on the Ukrainian border, and any attempt by Western leaders to be able to talk to the Russian president and to get him to de-escalate the current situation is a welcome one. Obviously, we will assist where we can in de-escalating the current troop build-up, and also we will provide what assistance we can and what we're asked for, if it's obviously reasonable, to try and help with de-escalation. It's in no one's interest to see this develop further, and that's why we welcome what Prime Minister Johnson is attempting to do, to speak with President Putin and get this issue resolved and to de-escalate the current situation on the Ukrainian-Russian border.
And do you expect economic sanctions will be used against Russia in an attempt to get Putin to back down?
Well, obviously, President Biden has made it very clear that if Russia took certain steps, that the US would look to use economic sanctions as one tool to get Russia to stop taking further action. So that has been raised by President Biden very clearly as one of the options that's available to the United States. Our hope is that we don't get to that situation. The best thing would be for the current situation to be de-escalated, and that's what we're hoping for. And hopefully, Prime Minister Johnson will be able to make some inroads in that regard with his call with President Putin overnight.